We're going to get right into it because there's kind of a lot to do. Two fun things. We're making brownies and we're making a chewy caramel, and then we're going to put them together. So you get two skills out of this recipe. There's a lot of different ways to make caramel, and there's a lot of different things that are called caramel. So there's like hard caramels, chewy caramels, that's candy version. There's caramel sauce. There's just plain caramel. You can like caramelize other things. So we're making a caramel that when cooled will be pretty thick. It's not like a really pourable thing. We're going to be trying to get it cool enough so that it comes into little like globs, kind of thick glob. That you'll see. It's going to be really fun. And then we're going to swirl it into our really delicious fudgy brownie mix. So things that you want to get started with. I've already got my oven preheated to 350. You can do that after we make the caramel, but I just don't want to forget. So, and it takes a while for my oven to come up to temperature. So I've already got that going. I don't have an 8x8 brownie pan. I think I lent it to somebody and never got it back. So I use an 8x13 pan and kind of MacGyver it with some foil packed up on one side, and then I line the whole thing so that it is more like a 8x8 oblong shape. And it does not matter. It doesn't have to be exactly square. You might have a little extra batter. You might have slightly different thickness than me or the person who has that perfect 8x8 square pan, and that's okay. If it's 9x9, fine. If it's like a 10-inch round, fine. There's a lot of different ways. Just don't make something that's really big, unless you double the recipe. Like you had a 9x13 casserole dish or something, you would want to do this maybe by 1.5. So there's adjustments you can make if you don't have the right equipment. Don't stress and go rushing out to shop for a pan. You just make do with what you have, and it works. If you want to use parchment paper to line your pan, that's fine. I just use foil because I need to kind of create that wall to minimize the size. That's that. So I have my pan ready, I have my oven ready, I have all my brownie ingredients ready, but we're going to get going on the caramel so that we can get it cooling down in the fridge while we do that other stuff later. So I'm going to move the camera so you can just watch the pot during this process. It is fast and fun, and I think that'll work. Should be okay. See if I can slide a little bit closer. All right. So we're going to start by putting our sugar directly into the pan and on medium heat. Seems crazy, but that's how you make caramel. You just melt sugar, and you can just melt it, and then you can just add butter. You can not add cream. Some caramels have both. Some have none. And some caramel sauce is just sugar. But to make it really chewy and nice, the butter and the cream combine. That's how you get caramel candies a lot of the time. So we are going to start with 1/2 cup of sugar. I'm using my 1/4 cup, so I'll have to do that twice. This is always fun when you've got kids helping to make them do the math. You have to homeschool now. There's always room for a lesson somewhere, right? So 1/2 cup of sugar right into the pan, and I've got my pan on medium heat. I'm going to use a silicone little mini spatula for this, just because metal can react. It can kind of cause the sugar to crystallize if there's anything. Like, you can kind of have a bad experience. If you have a really nice, clean, dry metal thing, and it's stainless steel, not aluminum, then it would probably work fine. Silicone is nice because the caramel, the sugar just slides right off of it. It doesn't stick to it, which can be a problem on some like wooden utensils. It just sort of depends on what works best. I like the silicone because it does just, the caramel comes off of it very nicely while it's cooking. So you want to stir it. It's odd to just stir sugar in a pot, but you want to stir it a little bit. Try to make sure that you're not getting it on the sides, up the sides of the pan. If any water gets into it, it's going to like crystallize and not work. So you want to make sure that your pot was perfectly dry and your utensils are very, very dry. I'm not stirring this like violently. I just want to make sure that the sugar that is on the bottom doesn't burn while the sugar on the top hasn't even begun to melt. Oh, it smells amazing. It's already smelling like hot cooking sugar. What's amazing is this is going to melt into a dark, sticky liquid, and then we're going to add our butter, and it is going to sizzle. It's going to kind of spit and spat, and that is okay. You just want to be aware of it and be careful as you add your little butter cubes into the sugar. Just watch your fingers. That's a part an adult should definitely do if you have family helping. I love baking with kids, so if you do that, that is one of the best things. That's how I learned. I was 3 years old when my grandmother started. First thing that we made was peach cobbler. So good. And now's the season for that. We're going to be using a lot of peaches in some classes coming up. We're going to be doing, I think next week I have peach and raspberry upside down cake. Get excited. All right, so I can start to feel that it's sticking to the bottom. Like my utensil is dragging a little bit more through it. The bottom is starting to clump up. I don't know if you can see that. It's actually starting to stick to the utensil. That's because it's starting to melt. But the reason I'm still stirring it is so that the thick clumps on the very bottom of the pot don't burn. We don't want burnt sugar. It's a very fine line while making caramel sauce or caramel. I keep going back and forth. I'm not sure how I say that word. You want to be real careful about how you stir it, though. I'm just kind of folding it and gently scraping the bottom. I'm not whisking it, really. I definitely don't want to cause any crystallization or any like breakage in the caramels. So it's a delicate but fun procedure as it begins to melt. Like first it clumps and starts to stick to itself, and then it melts into its liquid form, which is a really, really fun science project as well. Not only are we doing math today, we've got some science going on. So some of the sugar can stick to the side of the pot. If that happens, don't scrape it off. Because it might just then form like rock crystals in your caramel. So that's why we want to be stirring it the whole time. But if you get any like pieces that stick up the side of your pan, don't try to scrape them back into the caramel. If they don't naturally melt off, then just sort of leave them there, because they will stay in like a hard form, and then they'll just be like a blemish in your caramel. They might even actually like cause it to crystallize, and then it doesn't liquefy. It just is like a broken, melted sugar. Don't want that. So it's definitely melting. I'm getting a lot more of a syrup. I hope you can see that, how it's sliding around on the bottom of the pot. I'm still just on medium, exact medium heat. Don't want to mess around with that because it's just sort of going nice and slow and steady. I think you can kind of see that. See how it's nice and pourable a little bit. Starting to caramelize nicely. Want to keep stirring it though. Make sure these kind of like icebergs of sugar keeps moving around, because that's going to help them incorporate as they melt into the rest of the already melted sugar. It's going to be kind of like this, sort of nice and chunky for a minute, and then all of a sudden it's going to be a beautiful golden light colored caramel syrup. Getting there already.
Julia, should it be bubbling?
Not if it's just the sugar, not yet. Keep it a little bit lower if it's already bubbling. Has it completely melted out?
Yeah, it looks.
If your sugar has already dissolved and melted out, then turn the heat down a little bit, and you can add the butter in. I'm just not at that point yet. Once you add the butter in, it will bubble. So be careful. I'm almost there. I'm right there. My medium, I guess, is a little bit lower than yours, which is good to know. Some ovens, even the stovetops, are different. Okay, I am so close. I just don't want to add in the butter while I have any solid chunks of sugar. So I want to make sure that it is purely liquid. And then I'm going to add in my 3 tablespoons of cold butter, at which point it will bubble and sizzle and pop a little bit. So I'm going to be very careful. Nice. I've got a really nice sort of maple syrup color going in here. Be extremely careful while using your utensil and making caramel. One of the most dangerous burns that you can get in the kitchen is a sugar burn. If you happen to get hot sugar on your skin, whatever you do, don't follow your instinct to brush it off. It will tear away the skin that it has attached to. You have to let it harden and cool, and then you can just pop it off like a piece of candy stuck to your arm or something. It's not fun, so avoid it at all costs. I still have a tiny little hole in my wrist from, well, the scar from where I had a hole in my wrist. Okay, so my butter went in. It's looking a little bit bubbly and nice. I'm going to turn the heat down because I need to, all the way to low, I need to measure out my cream. It's going to bubble and keep making its delicious caramel sauce. We are using a 1/4 cup heavy cream. And I'm using kosher salt, 3/4 of a teaspoon. So at this point,
Excuse me, Julie, I have a quick question.
okay,
So if we have a sugar burn, you don't recommend to brush it off. We let it cool and then we flick it off, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, did you get a little sugar on you?
No, I'm just asking because I've never heard of that.
Yeah, you want to let it cool and then kind of flick it off, just because if you, while it's still hot, if you pull on it, it will pull the skin that it's attached to. And it can create really, really bad cuts. And yeah, so you don't want to do that. So unfortunately, you kind of let it cool. And it will do that quickly at room temperature. It will. It's painful, but it will cool quickly because it's not on a pot anymore. It's on your skin. It will cool to your skin temperature quickly. And then you just flick it off. It's a weird thing. And unfortunately, even though my chef professor told us that while we were doing our sugar sculpting, I followed my gut instinct and tried to get it off my wrist, and it pulled off all of the layers of skin. I could see all the way into my arm. It was very interesting. So don't do that. That was when I was young and learning and naive. Let's see. Okay, so I'm stirring. I'm going to drizzle in the cream slowly while I'm stirring. I'm back up to medium heat, so it will be bubbling and cooking because we want to let this mix in and actually boil. Ooh, it's steamy and hot. For about a minute maximum, maybe not even the full minute. It's just until it's nice and thick and the right shiny consistency again. It's sort of like after it kind of boils itself out, after you've added that 1/4 cup of cream. Just keep stirring, let it bubble, let it boil. Now, if you were making candy, at a certain point you would need a candy thermometer because depending on if you want like a hard candy, it's called hard crack, or soft crack. Those are the 2 different like temperature levels that a thermometer, and so it would make 2 different textures of candy. Okay, so I'm going to turn the heat off. I have boiled for as much as I want to. I've got my shine back. The cream has well sort of emulsified into that butter, sugar, caramel sauce. I'm going to stir in my salt because I want to make sure it dissolves into there. 3/4 teaspoons. So I'm using my 1/4 teaspoon measure. I use kosher salt for almost everything just because it's what I have around for cooking. And then I use table salt for baking unless the recipe specifically calls for a specific salt. Just sort of regular fine grain iodinized salt. Yeah, I can't say that word. So that is my caramel. It is beautiful.
Julia, is if you have sea salt instead of kosher salt, is that a fine substitution?
Yes, absolutely. You could use any salt, honestly. Just adjust the quantity a little bit. But if your sea salt is a coarse sea salt, then you would do the same, 3/4 teaspoon. If it's a fine grain sea salt, then maybe about half a teaspoon. Start with that and then see how salty it tastes to you. But yes, that sea salt is a wonderful salt to have in your kitchen if you prefer that. Kosher salt, I think it is still made from sea salt. I need to look into that. There's a lot of different salts and where they get it from, but it's just how it's been blessed and treated, and the coarseness of it is what I like about it. But, okay, I've got my good, nice, liquidy caramel here. I'm going to pour it into a glass bowl. If you have a glass measuring cup or something like that, that would be great. Definitely going to scrape out as much of it as I can. I want to get all of this. Glass is going to, well, first of all, not melt when you put it in the fridge with this very, very hot sauce. And it will help cool it down faster because when you put the glass in the fridge, it will become cold and therefore help cool down the hot caramel even faster. Okay, because we want that to get to at least a chewy texture before we can use it in our brownies. Okay, so that is going right into my fridge. Don't put it into the freezer. Fridge only. Too much water and condensation in the freezer, it would really mess it up. So we are going to make our brownie mix now. This is really fun. I like this recipe. Okay. Move you back into position. Get a little cleared up here. So you want softened butter for this, for the brownies. If you didn't leave your butter out this morning, I'll try to remember to remind you guys to do that the night before if things like that are in the recipes, because that's hard to get in the habit of looking at it all. But softened butter is what we're looking for, not totally melted. So if you do need to soften it in a pinch by putting it in the microwave, maybe only put some of it in the microwave, let it melt, and then mix that with the rest of it and kind of try to get a nice, more of a softened consistency. If it's all melted, then maybe put it into the fridge, let it get a little bit more solid. We're just looking for soft, not melted. It might actually change the way the brownies come together a little bit. So softened, not melted. 10 tablespoons of softened butter. We're going to do our sugar, cocoa, eggs, flour, and vanilla. Traditional brownie medley. Sometimes, yes.
That's a quick. How would the texture of our brownies change if we use like softened butter versus cold butter versus like melted butter?
Okay, so good question. If it's cold butter, it will not incorporate into the batter, and it needs to be incorporated in, not so that if it goes in cold chunks, it will stay in kind of separated little fat particles, which will then melt, and so you'll have a nice flat brownie. If you have melted butter, it's sort of a similar process. You'll actually just have like a greasy brownie a little bit. It'll be kind of denser in terms of the fat, the way it feels in your mouth, because it's the butter has already melted and absorbed into the other ingredients. And I don't know exactly the science of it. I just know I've made these mistakes before. And so I can tell you like what it ends up feeling like and eating like. And we want like a nice cakey brownie, and the soft butter just, it becomes part of the batter, and then it makes it the right consistency to be able to then bake instead of melt in the oven, if that makes sense. I hope that makes some sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so we want our butter. The brownies are really straightforward. We're going to just mix everything until it's combined. And that is kind of the easy, fun part about some recipes. It doesn't really matter what order you put it in for this. It doesn't matter if you like I know when we do some things, we are really concerned about over mixing. You just stir this a lot, and then it's done. So it's really fun and forgiving. Another reason why it's a great one to have kids help. So I have my butter, softened butter in here. I'm going to go 1.5 cups of granulated sugar. I'm using a 1/2 cup measurer. Remember to level it off. If you need to like scrape it off or shake it off, you want a nice even measure cup. You don't want it to be a mounded cup unless the recipe calls for that, which sometimes it does. So that just means you have a little bit extra like that. It would be a mounded cup, but we want a nice even to get a nice even measurement. So that is my, oh, I need 1 1/4 cups. So that was almost way too much sugar. Even just a 1/4 cup sugar will make a huge difference. And then it would be kind of candy brownie. It would be harder. It would be a little bit more like caramelized inside. That would be, and way too sweet. So careful about reading your recipes. 3/4 of a cup cocoa powder. That says, yeah, I'm gonna use my 1/4 cup. And some containers, like this nice Hershey's classic cocoa, you can just kind of scrape it on the sides to get a nice even measure. 3 of these to make 3/4 cup. If your cocoa has been sitting around for a while, make sure that it's unsweetened, first of all, and you're not using like cocoa mix for hot chocolate. Unsweetened baking cocoa. You can use dark cocoa if you prefer that type of thing. You can absolutely supplement that into this recipe. If your cocoa powder has been sitting around for a little while, which is fine, it might be kind of clumpy and cakey, so you want to sift it. If you have a sifter or like a fine mesh bowl sieve, just push it through there and it's back to working order. So that's my cocoa, my sugar, my butter. I need 3 eggs. My vanilla is over here. I'll grab that. And then our flour I'm going to put in at the end, actually. So I need 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Vanilla just makes desserts taste more like desserts, even if it's a chocolate dessert. I love it. It's like adding lemon to things. It makes it taste more like what it's supposed to taste like. Helps enhance the chocolate. If we put a lot of vanilla, it would taste like vanilla. And that's not what we're going for. So I'm going to add my 3 eggs. You could substitute, if you're looking for substitutions for eggs in baking, a great option is non-fat plain Greek yogurt. It has very, very similar kind of an after effect of creaminess, and it's a nice substitution. I think that someone has actually worked out what a ratio might be of how to change that in baking. You can find that online. I'll look that up for us, but there's also just a lot of recipes online that exist already that call for Greek yogurt instead of eggs and like creamy products. So if that's something that you want to look into, that is a fun option. 1/2 cup of flour only. Make sure that it's nice and level. And that is our brownie mix. I love just getting it all into one bowl and then being able to have fun mixing. I'm going to kind of clear some of this off. I always smash the yolks first, just to make sure that they get nice and broken. And then I'm going to incorporate the butter into the dry goods so that I don't start just violently whisking this all around, because it will create a disaster mostly in my face. So then I start in the middle and just work it all around. Butter is all stuck in the whisk. Gotta make sure that that comes out, because that's where a large amount of the moisture is coming from in this recipe. Kind of like a really hard, dry, thick mud. Oh, be careful not to do what I just did, where I stirred it up over the edge of the bowl a little bit, just because now we're missing about, I don't know, 1/8 of a teaspoon of my dry mix. Want to keep it all in the bowl. I'm going to use that awesome rubber spatula situation and make sure I get all that butter out. And I'm going to switch to the spatula now that I've got the eggs nicely whisked up already. Go back and forth between these utensils, and that is just sort of what works for me. If you have a big, like a big wooden spoon or spatula, that would work really well. I like to make sure that I get the eggs kind of, because then I get a little bit of a fluffiness going on. All right, so just stir, stir, stir. Make sure that you get, kind of use the wet part in the middle to scrape up any dry cocoa and flour on the sides. Just making sure you're incorporating it all as best as you can. It is a very thick, fudgy brownie batter. Sometimes just by kind of tapping the sides of a bowl, a lot of the loose, dry flour or ingredients will, well, free themselves and slide down into the bowl. So that's what I'm doing when I do that, if you catch me doing that. So I have got a very thick, very chocolatey, delicious mix here. Just double checking. Butter, sugar, cocoa, eggs, flour, vanilla. And then our caramel has been cooling in the fridge. Oh, I made a cocoa powder mess, y'all. That's okay. Fun of cooking and baking. All right, so my funny little MacGyver pan. I'm going to add a little bit of a pan spray, just to make sure, since I'm using a reactive kind of metal paper, just so it'll be easier to get out later. Also, I wanted to make sure, whether you're using foil or parchment, that a lot of my edges come up over the edge, because then at the end, I can just lift the whole foil out to remove the brownies rather than trying to awkwardly cut them inside the pan. So I'm going to scrape all of this chocolatey goodness into the prepared pan. You want to get as much of it as you can. Really scrape that bowl clean. It's going to come out in a pretty thick gob. I'm just going to spread it out, making sure I get all of that out. I want all of that good stuff. Okay, if you work in a bakery, this is money, right? All these ingredients. This is money that you are spending in the shop. This is like a whole nother bite of brownie in there. So you want to get that out. Okay. Now you gotta spread it out. Make sure that it goes to the edges. It doesn't have to look perfect, because it will melt itself out. We've got that softened butter still in there. The eggs are going to help add the leavening, make them nice and fluffy. Spread this out as much as you can to the edges. You do want it to be even as much as possible, but don't worry about it looking like perfect or smooth. I'm just trying to make sure that there's an even amount kind of all spread out around my pan. Make sure I get all of this mix off of my spatula. And then we're going to put our caramel in here in a really fun way. Clean this off just a little bit. All right. Caramel doesn't have to be completely solid, but we just wanted to make sure that it was not completely liquid. Mine's still a little bit hot on the bottom. So I'm going to just, I think it's going to be just fine, actually. You would prefer it to all be set up like it is on top. it's formed a nice cool skin on top, but unfortunately it's still kind of hot on the bottom. So I have more of a liquid caramel than I would want. If you let this get cool to the consistency that we're actually looking for, you can pull like little globs of it and dollop it around your brownie mix. I'm just going to go ahead and kind of pour it and let it swirl around. We're going to swirl it around with a knife, and that's the fun part. I'll show you. Just going to pour it in like globs, and I think it's going to be delicious. How can it not be? This part, I think, if you have the time and you don't mind waiting, let it set up and get to be a very slightly chewy consistency. It should only take maybe another 5 more minutes in the fridge. I think I didn't have it close enough to the bottom so that the bottom would get cold. Okay, I'm gonna put this on top. I'm not getting rid of that caramel. I'm going to use that. I just want to show you first. I'm going to swirl this in, and what that means is you use a butter knife, and you're using it at its flat side to swirl just by going back and forth into the batter. This will incorporate the caramel down into the chocolate, and it will create a, if you happen to put the caramel on in globs instead of big puddles like I did, then it creates a really nice like swirl pattern in the top of the brownies, which it's going to be delicious either way. I just do want to make sure that I get some of that caramel down in there. So you're dragging it up and down and like creating a channel, and then the caramel kind of goes down into it. Yeah, that's sort of sinking down in there now. I'm going to have some nice caramel swirls all the way throughout the brownie. If we just like mix it together, then it would just be caramel flavored chocolate. That's why you want to delicately kind of just like layer it in swirl by swirl. See, this is the consistency. Now it's cooled down because it's not so much of it in this bowl. This is kind of the consistency where you can like put a glop of it down, and then you would swirl that in. Okay, so that is going to be just as good, and we got to get these into the oven. So I'm going to put this last bit of caramel because I don't want to waste any of it. Caramel and chocolate is my favorite of all of the sweet combinations. Okay. Swirl those in, swirl, 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 swirl. Okay, this is going to be great. I'm going into the oven on the middle rack, right in the center. And it says bake for 30 or 40 minutes. We might run out of time, but I think I'll be able to pull it out just at the last minute and show you at least what it's supposed to look like. Such a small batch, it might be done. It might be done by the time we're done. Let's see. Easy to clean up. Not that many dishes for this recipe, which is really nice. I love an easy to clean up recipe. What else? Yeah, next week, the raspberry peach upside down cake calls for fresh raspberries and fresh peaches. So they have all of that in almost every supermarket now. It is definitely in season. The farmers markets everywhere in town should have stone fruit and berries. But I wanted to kind of let you know some of that. Most of the ingredients are the same. It's just like cake ingredients: flour, sugar, butter, vanilla, maybe a little bit of milk. I'll have to double check. So if you are looking for any of the like odd ingredients, it would be peaches and raspberries. And if you can't find those, nectarines, great substitute. Any color peach, it doesn't matter if it's white or yellow. That is definitely like a personal preference. They will both work in the cake. Let's see. Let me double check That is what I was planning for next week. I just don't want to like tell you that and then, oh, sorry, that is not what it was. Yeah. So were there any other questions? Oh, it was bubbling because the butter went in. Oh, well, how did it turn out? I hope it still worked out okay. The caramel, even if the butter goes in.
It hardened. It hardened. We actually have it right here.
We started
Yeah.
over.
But we started over.
Okay. It is a delicate procedure. But it's fun once you get it down because it is actually, once you know how to make that, like it's really fun and delicious and easy. Yeah, I'm sorry that happened. I'm sorry I didn't stop you. Yeah, I know that first question. Yeah, you just add the sugar into the pot. That is the thing. If there were any water or anything in the pot, it would cause kind of bad reactions, either hardening or like a weird broken crystallized effect. All kinds of things can happen at that point. Oh wow, I got cocoa powder all over my succulent plants, and I'm having too much fun in this class, you guys. Yeah, so the only weird thing in next week's recipe, and it's not really that weird. I think I've seen it in every market that I've been in the last couple of weeks. So any kind of peach or nectarine, and if you don't like raspberries, strawberries would be great. If you don't want berries, you can just do an upside down peach cake. It will work just as well, just as deliciously. And I'm gonna make it in a classic 9x13, I think, casserole, like a grandma kind of an upside down cake, I think. So no weird equipment, nothing special. We can make it all by hand. You don't need a mixer. So it's gonna be a fun one next time. I am just sort of trying to get this cocoa disaster figured out while we hang out waiting for the brownies to bake. Even if you don't have questions about these brownies or next week, if anything has popped into your head about any baking or cooking things, let me know. Could I whisk eggs separately before adding them? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, that's a smart idea. I just tend to not want to waste the extra dish. You've heard me talk about dishes enough, but yeah, really, yeah, you could do it like in a measuring cup or a small bowl, and then add that in so that it comes together a little bit easier with the spatula. That would probably work nicely. I just use my brute strength. But that's a really good question.
Is it possible to find the written recipes online for the teaching kitchen?
Yes, we do have a catalog of recipes that we have used so far. I'm not quite sure if I've uploaded this week's yet, but I emailed them out. So if you signed up, unfortunately, maybe just after I emailed them, then that's probably why. But I email them a week in advance so that you can, well, the Friday in advance so you can shop, and then again the day before class. But for past recipes, yes, we upload them, and they're all open access on our website. It's like a whole catalog, and I will try to upload this week's as soon as possible so you can have access to this one.
Is it on the UCLA Rec website, or like what website?
Yeah, we're at fitwell.recreation.ucla. Here, I'll type it in, .edu/teaching kitchen.
Hi,
So we are your like what not to do students.
What's
This
yeah?
is our second round of the caramel, and it's all rocky.
Well, that actually is part of the process. I think that's okay if you just let that keep stirring, but there might have been something. What kind of sugar are you using?
White.
Just regular white granulated sugar?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think that's okay. Just keep stirring it on the heat. It kind of ends up looking like that, like it's clumping together, but it'll start to melt on the bottom. Just stir it nice and slow and steady, and hopefully it'll melt into a syrup. The clumps are disconcerting, but it should melt out.
So after, and then when it does melt out, that's when you add the cream.
That's
And then
when you add the butter.
No, this is the butter.
oh, there is butter.
That's when it's when we added the butter that it did that.
Oh. it was already a melted syrup?
Yeah.
But it was a little bumpy. And then it got really bumpy.
I think that you need to let it get to be a completely melted out syrup and then add the butter.
And how many minutes is it supposed to take to do that, roughly?
I think it took me about like 8. It takes a little while for the syrup to get to that point, and then it takes only about 30 seconds for it to kind of finish. It's frustrating. Here, actually, like I can make another one while I wait. We're just waiting for brownies anyway. I don't mind having extra caramel in my life. Okay, I'm gonna make a half batch though. Let's see. Bring the camera over and I'll do it at the same time. We can try this out. Because it might be an issue with
So much.
the sugar. I'm gonna do only a 1/4 cup just to minimize my extra caramel amount here. Let's see. I need a dry measuring cup. You want to make sure that everything that you're using is very, very dry. Okay. If any water is in your pot or in the measuring cup or it's into there before it should, like, no water should get into this process. Okay, 1/4 cup, right into the pot, nothing else in it. Heat to medium heat. Just turn the flame on and let it go. And then this is the challenging part, is to kind of let it go long enough. I use a different little silicone spoon here. Is to let it go long enough and be patient until it is actually a complete liquid. I need to get some more butter ready. Let the pan get a little bit hot. Okay, so for a half batch, 1½ tablespoons of butter. Okay, I've got my butter ready to go, which I want to definitely cut into small cubes. That's important that it is in small pieces so that when it gets tossed into the butter, it incorporates and starts to melt in small sections. Okay, this is my 1½ tablespoons of butter ready to go. I'm going to stir this, but very slowly. I'm not trying to like throw it around. I'm mostly just trying to keep it from burning on the bottom of the pot. And it's going to do this for a few minutes. It's going to just sort of seem like I'm moving sugar around in a pot. And that seems weird, but that's what we do. Just kind of gently stirring, making sure that the bottom isn't burning. As it starts to get hot, it will start to kind of stick to the bottom of the pot and clump up a little bit. You might feel like more of a thickness on your spoon as you're stirring it. But it's still just powdered sugar. I mean, powdery granulated sugar. Mine is just barely starting to form little tiny clumps, kind of like sand. So it's a slow process. I can see, though, that the sides of the pot are getting really hot and little granules of sugar that were on the sides have started to melt. As I start to stir more, it clumps together and kind of forms little clumps, and it's sticking to the bottom. I can feel that happening. With my spoon, I can kind of just like feel the drag of the spoon. It's thick, sticky sugar now. And I can visually see in small little areas that it's melting into a liquid. And it's kind of sliding around, but some of it is still definitely just granulated sugar, which is why you need to keep stirring it. And it's going to form these like odd clumps And those clumps are very annoying. But you do have to wait until all of the clumps are gone before adding in the butter. You can definitely smell it now. It smells like cooking sugar. Some of the syrup that already has started to melt is turning a kind of a very pale amber color. The little chain on this spoon is a problem. It's getting hot and it's burning me. Okay. Go, just keep stirring. It's turning into now more of a slight honey color, like a very pale honey color, but I still have these little like craggly icebergs of sugar in there. So I'm not done yet. You want to make sure that all of that is completely melted out, nice and slow. Still have really small little clumps and bits. Again, I have some sugar crystals on the side of my pot that got stuck up there, and I'm doing my best not to scrape those in, because they can actually have an adverse effect as well. They are not melted. They're now like a crystallized hard candy piece. Okay, so I've got this all melted. Now it is a 100% golden syrup, no crags, no clumps. And that's when I put in my butter all at once, carefully. Watch your hand away. And then it's going to bubble a lot. And you want to stir, 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 stir. Melting the butter and really incorporating it and letting it come together with the caramel. They become one. Beautiful. Stir, 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 stir. Once that has fully incorporated itself, it's going to kind of stop the rise that it was doing, the major bubbling, although it will continue to boil at this heat. So I'm going to be adding in my cream. I think I already, yep. So I need, half of a quarter of a cup. That's a weird one. Okay. Quarter of a cup, half that. Eyeballing it. Okay, while stirring, you've got this nice, lovely, deep, rich caramel. It's bubbly on top, but sugary on bottom. You're going to, in a steady stream right in the middle, then pour your cream as it bubbles and steams. Be very careful. Get it all in there. Keep stirring, stirring, stirring until the bubbling will kind of subside. You want to cook this, though, at this high bubbling, boiling temperature for close to a minute, 30 seconds to a minute, and let it like cook out and smooth up and get really nice and glossy on top, and just helps cook into the raw cream into it, and it becomes a lovely thick sauce. Now, if you have extra caramel, which I'm going to have now, you can let it completely solidify, and you can cut them into squares, and you've got chewy caramel candies. Or you can then reheat it and use it as a sauce on ice cream. You can make another batch of brownies. You can put it, as if you melt it back down or reheat it in any way, like in a double boiler or just by putting it maybe in the microwave, you can reheat caramel into a sauce and then pour it over whatever you want, really. I think I'm going to turn these into candies, though, so I'll let it get hard, and then I'll cut them into squares, and I'll put a picture on our Instagram so everyone can see that. Keep an eye out for that in the next couple days. And so that, once you have that and you've cooked the cream in for close to a minute, turn the heat off, make sure you've stirred it really well, and you've got caramel. This is a soft caramel that can be either a sauce or a candy. And I hope that helped to see it again. I know it's not something that I can really like stop and show each step, because once you start, you just have to kind of keep doing it. But I hope that seeing it again helped and it works out. And again, if it doesn't, there might be an issue with some water having got, excuse me, Sorry about that. Some water having gotten into your sugar, possible. Because even if your sugar looks okay, it might have a little bit of extra moisture in it for some reason. That's an option. Could be that there was maybe just that fraction amount of moisture on the utensil or in the pot. That can change the effect. And literally just waiting until that very last minute, once the sugar has melted completely before moving on to the butter. So those are the important parts of that process. Hopefully that helps. I'm really excited actually to have extra caramel, so thanks. See, once it cools, it's already starting to cool into what you would expect to find in a, like the jars that they sell in the ice cream aisle. It's called caramel topping or sundae topping. I think Smucker's makes a version of it. This is exactly the consistency that you would get in those jars. I didn't salt this batch because I'm going to turn it into candies, like I said. Otherwise, everything would just be salted caramel, and there's nothing wrong with that. I love salted caramel. I don't really care if that fad is passe. I am going to ride that train until it crashes. I love it. Will making candies work if we pour the caramel into? Yes, a silicone ice cube mold is the exact thing to pour it into. Then you get really fun shaped candies. It's a really great idea. Just don't put it in your freezer like the ice you normally would. Put it, you can either let it come to room temperature, let it cool down naturally, or put it in the fridge. But yeah, that's a really fun thing to do. Those little, any kind of candy molds or ice cube tray molds, or you can do regular shaped ice cube tray if you have the silicone version. That's a great way to pop the candy out once it's done. You don't need to spray it if your silicone doesn't have any scratches or imperfections in it. If it does have any scratches in it, then I don't know, maybe just a light bit of baking pan spray or something, but it should work if it's silicone. That's the whole general idea. All right, I am excited to look at the brownies. I'm at least going to spin them around, but we're getting to the time where I kind of want to show you guys what's going on, if there's anything even going on. Sure hope so. Still pretty much baking. Okay, I'm going to turn my oven up a little bit, but at the very last minute, I'm going to show you at least that we've got some good swirl action on top. Unfortunately, brownies just need to bake until they're done. What you're looking for, very specifically though, in these brownies, people often have the mistake that that toothpick is supposed to come out super, super, super clean in everything that you bake. Not true. That can be overbaked for a lot of things. So with this brownie, you want to stick it into a point in the brownie where it's mostly chocolate, so that when you pull it out, it's not just covered in gooey caramel, because then you'll never really know what's going on. But use a toothpick or a very thin, sharp knife and poke it into a bit of the brownie that's mostly brownie. And if it comes out with soft, moist crumbs, then it's perfect. It's good to go. If it comes out with raw batter or any kind of like raw looking cocoa chocolate, then you need to let it cook longer. If it comes out clean, it's overdone, just because, well, it's a very dense cocoa powder based brownie recipe, and so it will get dry. It will get too dense and just kind of crumbly and overdone and not very fun. Now the caramel will help it kind of stay gooey, but if it's an overdone, dried out brownie, it's not going to be really great. So, I mean, it's going to be still great, but you know what I'm saying. Just try to keep it a little bit what you would normally go for in terms of baking, and then you're looking for moist crumbs to come out. What am I? We poured the caramel on top and did with a knife. If it just looks like it's layered on top, I would suggest keep swirling it in. Do a few more swirls with the knife, and it should start to sink in on a few more passes through. That's what I had to do also. The first time I put it in, it just kind of looked like a layer, but the more times you go through it, the more it will look like a swirl. Also, the more set up your caramel was, the more likely you will get more distinct swirl patterns. We'll do another swirl, I think, coming up in another recipe, so I'll be able to show you. But this one, I didn't want to, I knew I was running out of time to get it in the oven. I still didn't make it in time, I think, to be able to show you. Because the finished product, there's a lot of brownie recipes out there that get really kind of dried out on top and cracked and crackly, and that's actually what you're going for with those versions. That is not necessarily what we're going for here. We want it to be a nicely finished, just sort of brownie and caramel top. So I will take pictures. If I can't show you what that's supposed to look like now, then I will make sure to take a great couple of pictures to put on our site to show you. If you don't have to rush off, then I won't make you. You can wait until it's done, I suppose. But I know we're at an awkward time of day when lots of people have to get back to work. And if there are any other questions. No. Okay, so I am going to show you what mine is starting to look like, because I can show you like how close I am at this point and what you're looking for, which is not very close, but I can show you. Around the sides, I am getting a nice finished baked brownie effect. And in the middle, I still have very wet brownie batter. Around the sides, nice baked brownie effect. Very, very wet batter. It's baking though through the middle and from the bottom, I can tell, because there's bubbles, and it's going to be done in probably 10 minutes. So from this point, I gotta keep it in the oven. I hope that you could kind of see that. This is like right in there. It's just starting to become that kind of nice finish of the top of a brownie. So all the way around the edges, which means it's very close, but very far. All right, so I will definitely post a picture of the finished product. I hope that you guys, if you're making yours this morning along with me, that they come out eventually. If there are any other issues, you can reach out, either message me on Instagram or email me. You all should have my email. And I just put in our website into the chat earlier, so I think my email's on there, our Instagram's on there. If anyone needs anything, we have recipes on there. I will try to upload all of the most recent recipes, but we also have tons of our old videos from our spring session classes, so lots of other baking recipes and workshops that you could go back and watch and follow along with there. If anyone has any questions about substitutions for next week, you can hit me up, but it's basically just fruit, upside down cake, and if you want to make it gluten-free, you can just substitute a gluten-free flour mix for regular flour, because there's nothing else that's going to be, that would need to be replaced if you wanted to do gluten, and that would work fine. It would be a really delicious cake. I would recommend the Bob's Mills. If you do like to play around with gluten-free options, they're like one-for-one replacement. Gluten-free mix is excellent and has really great outcomes, and literally just swap it into any of your baking recipes, and it's really a nice alternative. So that's for next week. Like I said, keep a lookout just, in the next 20 minutes for the pictures of the final product. I'll be able to put it all up there, including the bite that I take out. I hope you all enjoy it. I hope that you make this. It's really decadent and delicious. If you doubled it, it would fit into one of those 9x13 pans pretty perfectly. So then you'd have a lot of brownies. Yeah, I think I got most of the questions. Let me just double check. Oh, yeah, you could definitely use the brownie part of this recipe to make just brownies. They would be extremely fudgy brownies. They are a dense and fudgy brownie because then you add in the like super sweet decadent caramel, and that kind of like lifts it up. But yeah, it would be a really, really good fudgy brownie. Yeah, it would make a nice chocolate bite for sure. I hope that I also have other brownie recipes though, if you wanted to just make plain brownies. So if you don't like really thick fudgy brownies, let me know, because I prefer mine a little cakier. So I have a really great cakey brownie recipe too. I can try to make sure that's posted into the catalog as well.